Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
It has now been 19 days since this project began, and while I have recollected quite a bit of data, I have objectively gotten nowhere. I'm not sure if I can really get to the bottom of this. Every time I think I have a lead, I come to a wall, sometimes literally. I am faced with the sheer inscrutability of this place. Maybe I should just head back. My notes on the matter up to now should be enough evidence of what they're looking for. Our first clue was the appearance of bulbous growths on the subway tracks referred to as subway mutants. The name is overselling it. Though strange in their composure, meaty bulbs that pulsate when exposed to strong light, one would be hard-pressed to call them living things. They began to appear on the tracks and were violently destroyed upon being run over, splashing the sidelines of awaiting passengers with foul-smelling slime. The construction project had to be halted until we got to the bottom of these phenomena. I was sent to investigate Sector 24, directly under the area in question. Knowing full well of who knows the abandoned tunnels beneath the working subways the best, I conducted a preliminary investigation with a number of homeless individuals who at least claimed to have ventured into the constraints of Sector 24. The area is considered forbidden territory for the homeless who have made other parts of the subway their home, as far as they claim. Apparently, they have been familiar with these subway mutants, which I stress as just bulbous growths and not the subject of Hollywood horror films, and have stayed away from them on instinct. They could not tell me exactly where they grow, or how, or from what. They mostly remarked on their foul smell. Other than that, they warned me not to enter Sector 24, at least not on my own. I disregarded these warnings as urban mythical paranoia and proceeded. So far, nothing has indicated that I would have done better to heed their advice. I have come down here with all the necessary equipment to survive underground for an extended period, approximately 4 weeks. I was told that this method of investigation was ridiculous and that there was no reason for me not to re-emerge and continue the following day. But unfortunately, I know this place too well and have furthermore been enraptured by its mystery. Over the past days, I have approached the surface enough times to make contact and establish my position, but other than that, have remained down here. To be frank, it is also a self-challenge and an opportunity for urban exploration like I have never been offered before. What follows now is a number of entries regarding the various phenomena noted during my stay in Sector 24 and possible explanations for it. I must stress that I have found no grand explanation for all the things that go down here and will have to head back with the collected data, possibly to return again at a later date. 1. Bulbous growths. Subway mutants. These formations are ever present in Sector 24. As remarked before, they mostly appear as fleshy, bulbous growths on the more humid sections of the subway, especially close to the reservoir. Depending on their closeness to water sources, their size can vary dramatically. During an inspection yesterday, I came upon the largest yet, a conglomeration of growths that has completely overtaken a small room within the labyrinthine passages of the abandoned sector. The entire room pulsates with these growths, livid white and red in color, with various patterns and smudges and the like. Have also noted hair-like growths, possibly similar to feelers, and more solid protuberances, much like ridges lining the edges of their central mass. Working hypothesis is that they are a type of fungi. Much as I was told, they smell quite badly. 2. Subway living. I was told by the individuals that I interviewed that nobody lives in Sector 24 for a variety of reasons, but this is simply not true. During my stay here, I have found, for example, discarded pans and plastic forks as well as trays and old rags. My most recent confirmation of recent living down here in Sector 24 consisted of a number of possible encounters with a reclusive subject who fled when I tried to interact with him. However, I have heard footsteps and clanging on several occasions now, and have continued to come across discarded items indicative of habitation. This becomes particularly clear whenever the sound of a passing subway rattles the confines of Sector 24, which seems to agitate the subject and causes movement. The corridors, paths, and nooks of this place are labyrinthine. I cannot stress that enough. Venturing too far is asking to get lost, and since the individual seems to be uninterested in contacting me, I have not bothered him more than necessary. Addendum. Heard loud scream at 2336, have heard additional sounds since. 3. Symbols. During my stay in Sector 24, I have found several peculiar graffiti more similar to symbols. There are several permutations on a basic motif, which is that of an eye and a hand drawn over the eye. I have found this symbol drawn with spray paint, as well as scraped forcibly into walls and floors at various different points in the sector. Their location seems to have no particular significance that I can think of, though the bulbous growths that I was asked to investigate seem to congregate particularly around wherever these are drawn. I have found a particularly large sample of such a symbol drawn on a far wall, the symbol itself spanning about 8 feet in size. As is usual, the wall is covered with the growths. But I must also stress that the relationship between the two is not very notable, to the point where I think that there is a deliberate connection, as I have found growths where there were no symbols to be found, and vice versa. 4. Pipes. There are a number of pipes pumping wastewater into areas near the reservoir in Sector 24. I'm not sure of what their purpose or functionality is. They do not work around the clock. They only do so at very specific times. When they do, they spew a thick brownish bile that sticks to everything and mostly remains in glossy puddles under. I'm not sure where the source of these pipes is located, but it is entirely necessary to investigate the matter. Upon closer inspection, I have found that similar pipes are located in other parts of Sector 24 and spew the same substance at different times of day like clockwork, yet I am not sure of the machinations behind this system, and I certainly cannot see the purpose. I can only assume this is a combination of faulty engineering, planning, and urban decay. I certainly hope there is no crossover between this area and the sewers. 5. Spatial anomalies. To put it simply, the layout of Sector 24 has very little to do with the map that I was given for the investigation. It is entirely possible that the map is outdated, but Sector 24 has in no way been expanded or changed, given that it is abandoned, so I am not sure what to make of it. The architecture is puzzling as well. Wasted space is common. Many tight paths have led absolutely nowhere. Some stairways end in mid-air. Great open spaces in the middle of the complex seem to serve absolutely no purpose. The entire locale seems to have been constructed to confuse and disorient. I have mostly had to make do on my own for this, but have a basic idea of the layout of the place by now and know my way around it, though its outer reaches are a mystery to me. Addendum. It is possible that the layout of Sector 24 does have some sense to it. I have taken to drawing a provisional map based on what I have encountered, and it seems to form a shape which I'm sure I have seen in the past. There is a technical name for it, but I cannot remember. Will consult on arrival. 6. Recent modifications. Although as far as I know, nobody has used Sector 24 for anything since the initial construction of the subway system in the late 1980s, there have been some obviously recent modifications to its structure, though most of them are not very notorious. I have for one thing noticed that many of the steel bars that seal off some paths within the complex are quite new and could not have been put in place more than 5 years ago or so. These bars and other similar obstacles are placed in completely arbitrary locations and have severely impeded progress in my investigation. Strangely, many of the sounds I have heard coming from inhabitants within the sector have apparently come from areas beyond these sealed-off sections. It is likely that they know of paths which I have not discovered. An alternate theory is that they have been living there for several years before the area was sealed off, but that seems practically impossible. 7. Recording. 2 days before this log, I came upon an additional discovery which has startled and puzzled me. While I can try to offer explanations for the other phenomena encountered in Sector 24 thus far, I cannot summon a single hypothesis as to why there is a strange recording that plays every day in a specific area of the complex. I had not ventured to this part of the sector previously and was comprehensively shaken when it started playing. Upon later inspection, it is clear that someone has installed an audio system of built-in speakers in the tunnels that comprise this section, which play the recording every single day for an approximate period of 5 hours. The system itself seems to be very old and put into place quite some time ago, Certainly it is older than the steel bars previously mentioned. As for the recording, I'm not sure of what to make of it. It consists of a booming, commanding voice yelling something constantly. I am fairly sure that it speaks Latin, but cannot attest to that as I do not speak the language, and will have to consult with superiors later as to the nature of this strange implementation. Additionally, the vibrations caused by this booming audio reproduction seem to disturb the bulbous growths which shrivel and shake during the length of the recording. With no more time or resources to direct a continued investigation, I will have to head back with this limited recollection of information. In either case, I cannot proceed without further intel from superiors, because frankly I am baffled by the many strange characteristics of District 24. Addendum. Unexpected incident occurred last night. Camera equipment, flashlight, and backpack have disappeared while I was sleeping. Traces indicate that it was taken somewhere into the aforementioned area. Upon further investigation, I have encountered that one of the gates put in place has been forced open. We'll try to recover equipment before heading back. Fortunately, the recording is no longer being played. It's so loud that I cannot stand to be near the booming speakers when it plays. We'll now look for equipment and conclude the expedition. It is pleasantly quiet.
One day in 1988, I was on my way to an appointment in London's southeast area. I was travelling through Oxford Circus to get to the line which would take me to my station. In Oxford Circus Underground, there are at least 3 levels which are hubs with various lines that run through them, and I was on the second level heading to my eastbound train. I passed through the main hub of that level which had escalators going up to the street level and a series of other tunnels branching off of it. As I approached the main chamber, I was overcome by wonder and curiosity because there was a sound coming from there that I could not really comprehend. It was musical, and yet at the same time it was not. The sound was very enchanting, and I was becoming more and more curious by the second to see what was making it. Entering the main chamber en route to the other tunnel, I looked over to the source, and this is what I saw in the few seconds it took to cross that chamber. There were 2 very long escalators going up and down to the street level, and in the center between the 2 stood a little man. Upon first glance, I noted that he was cherubic in stature, with stocky arms and legs, and a face with rosy cheeks, and even at my location a few feet away, I could see his eyes were extremely blue, otherworldly in color, and twinkling. His lips were red, and he had a white mustache and beard, and his hair was blonde silver in color. These details were striking about the others that were in evidence. In his hands, he held a delicate silver flute from which that sound, or music, if you could call it that, was emanating. It was enchanting in the sense that one's mind would try to resolve it to a melody or a harmony, and then it would dance away to become something else. His dress was very much what you would imagine were you to see a Lutin in real life, drab in color with beige, earth green, and khaki brown tones, with boots that looked made of felt and the like, and even a small felt khaki green hat on his head, with a feather in it. Okay, so he could have been dressed in a costume, and that would have been the end of my curiosity, were it not for what was happening around him. Crowds of people going up and down those escalators on both sides were reaching into their pockets and wallets and dropping money into his oversized flute case. But was filled to overflow with coins. That was what caught my attention, and the fact that the people who were tossing in the money were not even looking at him. It was like they were in a trance. He was looking at me the whole time, watching me see what was going on, and I must have registered some astonished awareness on my face because he smiled in the middle of his playing and gave me a wink and a nod. He continued to play on, that eerie music filling the hall and the ears and mind, and the people continued on like sleepers, not paying attention, just digging in their pockets and dropping money into his bag. I continued on to my connecting tunnel, and not a few feet down that tunnel, I encountered a young man playing an electric guitar with an amplifier who was being completely drowned out by the eerie sounds coming from the adjoining chamber. I looked into his guitar case as I went by and saw that he had only a few coins in there. I looked at his face, and he gave me a look that bespoke amazement and irritation that his music should be drowned out by that otherworldly one coming from the main hall. Feeling badly for him, I dropped a pound coin into his case and continued on my way, slightly befuddled by what I had just seen and experienced. I later shared this with some friends that I had seen what I thought was a real Lutin and told them the story. They laughed at me and thought I'd lost my marbles. Then, about a week or so later, one of my friends came up to me at work very excited. She said she had just seen my Lutin in the same place in the exact same situation as I had described. Everything was the same down to the people in a trance dropping money into his bag. She said when she had seen him, her mouth dropped open in amazement as she realized I had been telling it exactly as it was, and he too had looked over to her during that moment of astonishment and given her a wink and a nod. We never saw or heard of him again after that, so perhaps he got what he needed.
Something was amiss. The water, instead of its clear, alluring blue, had turned to a murky brown. The sink filled with it, and I turned off the faucet, frowning. There must be something in the well. I lived in the country, and we didn't have water provided by the city. It was cheaper, at least. I walked out the door and into the forests. The well was nestled between a few trees, just a few yards away. But I was so far in the middle of nowhere that I had to take a hike just to check up on the well. Fantastic. A path was gouged within the land, covered in my old footsteps and the faintest hints of snow. It had all melted, but some lingered, clinging desperately to life. No leaves crunched under my feet, for they were all soggy and muddy. I digress. I reached the well, and to my surprise it was opened. The stone slab that commonly covered it was pushed aside. Maybe someone decided to take a shit in it, just to piss me off. Hopefully not. It tasted bad enough. I always had a bundle of rope next to the well, in case I needed to throw a bucket down there and scoop some out. The pumps were old and faulty and commonly fell apart randomly. They were so covered in duct tape that it would survive a nuclear blast. I searched around for the bucket I left there last week and fastened the rope to it. The gap was just enough to throw the bucket down. I gripped the end of the rope and let it fall, fall, fall. I didn't hear a splash for another 5 seconds. That was absurd. The well wasn't that deep. The rope was plentiful, and I still had a lot of slack, but it was deeper than I ever thought. I searched around for a tree to tie the rope to and wrapped it around the sturdy trunk of a pine tree. I tugged on the knot twice to make sure it was secure, before returning to the well. I looked down at it and still only saw the rope disappearing into the darkness. Maybe if I opened it up a bit more and let the light creep in. I decided against it, but did decide to grab a flashlight from my house. When I returned, it looked like the gap was larger. It might have been my eyes tricking me, but it seemed that the cap was pushed an inch or two further away, revealing more of the well. I turned on the flashlight and shined it down the tunnel. I still saw nothing. Not water, not the bucket, not even a creepy monster lurking within. Strange. I decided that I would go to an army surplus store and buy some flares. Maybe if I tossed one down there, I would be able to see the bucket I had lowered into it. I returned a few hours later. It was noon, and the sun hung lazily within the skies. The snow had long melted. The temperature was chilly in the 50s, but not enough to warrant a heavy coat. I removed a single flare from the pack at my side and cracked it open. The bright light of magnesium almost blinded me, but that's what I get for looking at the stupid thing. I dropped it into the well and watched as it descended. It fell down the shaft, illuminating everything as it did, the rope and soon the bucket. Then I heard a splash and the light distorted, submerged within the water, before being extinguished. The water was murky, but still. I didn't understand shit at this point. There must be something down there, or else it would be clear. Maybe it was something wrong with the pumps. Distracted with my thoughts, I barely heard the sound of stone against stone. I had cast my eyes to the clouds above, blocked out by a few thick branches. I didn't notice as the cap moved, slowly, the gap widening by the force of an unnoticed entity. Then I felt something grasp my shirt and pull. I fell forward and into the well face first. I fell. And then I hit the water. Fuck it hurt. It knocked me unconscious for a few seconds, but the deprivation of oxygen roused me. I couldn't see shit. My pack was soaked. The bucket hung above me. I grasped onto it and attempted to pull myself up, but I saw something cover the light, and then I felt the rope go slack. Something had cut the rope. I was trapped in a well with no way out, incapable of going anywhere. This sucked. I reached into my pack and cracked open another flare. I held it aloft, looking around. There was nothing. The water wasn't deep, up to my waist. Another strange thing. How did I survive that fall? I should have died. It might have been a more satisfying alternative than starving to death. The bottom of the well was illuminated by the light. I had rope, a bucket, and my pack of flares. I had a Swiss Army knife in my pocket, but I always carried it with me, and I doubt it would help much. And then I turned around and saw a doorway. I had to do a double take before I realized what the hell it was, and then I noticed that half of it was blocked off, making the water remain at the level it was, and forcing the person to swing a leg over it to get through unless they wanted to flood the place. I swung my flare around and lit up the tunnel. There was mold, mildew, and the stench of rotting vegetation. Sweet and sick, not much else. I decided, fuck it, let's flood the thing. I pushed open the door and stepped through. The water drained out, and within a few minutes dissipated into the ground. I looked at the floor of the well and saw nothing but the concrete that composed it, and sighed. I guess I'd have to go search deeper. Flare lighting my way, I walked a few steps before realizing something. If it was a long tunnel, I might not have a way back. Thinking smart for once, I grabbed the rope and left it at the exit, while trailing the rest behind me. When I ran out of rope, I would just drop a flare, roll back the rope, and keep going. Not like the exit would help much anyway. I walked down the tunnels for what seemed like hours. Water sloshed around my ankles, murky and dark, all sorts of yucky and icky things seeping into my boots. Wonderful. I took another step and sank down to my ankle in soft soil, a sickly squelch following. That was the loudest thing I had heard since I fell, and I soared loudly, retracting my foot with a jerk. The water and mud seemed to drain off my foot, reforming with the ground, leaving it flawless as though I never stepped in it. I took another tentative step and found it solid. What the hell? Water, water, everywhere, and not a drop to drink. I don't think I'd want to drink it anyway. I think it blinked at me. Things were getting weird, but I couldn't turn back. The tunnel continued ad infinitum, and I lost track of time within them. And then I found a door. I almost sighed with relief as I pressed my hand against the wooden rotten texture, but then I noticed something. I couldn't open it. It wasn't a door that you had to pull to open, but instead, push. As though nothing was supposed to enter. Everything was supposed to exit. That added another wonderful thing to the list of shit that happened to me today. I withdrew my knife from my pocket and stabbed the door out of frustration. I stabbed it again, and then twisted the knife. Maybe it was out of desperation or boredom or sheer anger, but I stabbed the shit out of that door until a large chunk was torn out. And within the chunk I saw water. Murky, brown, sludge-like water. It began to ooze through the single gap, released from its jail like molasses in winter or some weird shit. I took a step back and promptly got the hell out of there. I didn't remember the tunnel branching off into 3 different paths, but I took the first one that came to mind and ran to the left. The sludge, shit and whatever was far behind, but creeping up slowly, as though an amoeba extending its tentacles to suck up everything in its way. It was a liquid. It was a solid. It was some non-Newtonian shit that defied everything I knew about water. Maybe it was that capillary action I had read about in college years ago. But I don't think capillary action was sentient or could conveniently choose to ooze down the path I took and nothing else. I say ooze because that's all I can describe it as. It didn't flow like water, rushing down and sloshing against the walls. It didn't creep its way, slowly and cautiously. It just oozed down the hallway, sticking to the walls, forming a barrier of blob shit that followed behind me. It might have been luck or skill, but I found my way to the exit. Too bad the rope was still cut. Fuck me. The water was at my feet now, sloshing around my legs as though a natural liquid, just murky and slushy. I wondered why it wasn't dissolving my boots or something. It wouldn't have been surprising if it was acidic. So far, it wasn't really scary, just annoying. The water was up to my ankles now, and I tried to lift my feet but found them adhered to the bottom. Fucking awesome. I seized the side of the well and attempted to push myself up, bracing both hands on opposite sides, pushing up like some sort of athlete. I managed to pry my feet from the sludge, and they withdrew with a gross sucking sound. I braced my feet against the sides and began crawling up. The water accelerated its ascent. Now it was a foot below me and maybe 6 feet deep. It chased me, if I could even describe it as chase, to the very top of the well. I finally reached the exit and forced my way out, arms and legs burning, hands scraped raw, bleeding a shining ruby. I scrambled to the well and looked down. It was almost at the very top, threatening to overflow, seemingly limitless in comparison to the well. I frantically moved to the slab and forced my weight against it, trying to shut it, to cut off the demented, oozing liquid that was neither water nor mud, a solid yet a liquid. I gave one last push, and it gave away, the slab grinding noisily before shutting off the liquid. Thank God. Now I just needed to get the hell out of Dodge. As I walked away, it began to rain. I looked up and sighed. I suppose the world had just decided to shit on my day. The rain clung to my skin. It was dark, like sludge. Some of it got into my mouth. Maybe the water isn't so bad. It tasted sweet like sugar, saccharine upon my tongue with the texture and solidity of ice cream. I continued looking up, ignorant of the water filling up my throat, oozing into my lungs and clogging up my breathing. I fell to the ground. I closed my eyes. There was always a tale that when it rained, turkeys would look up and drown from the rain. Maybe there was a reason for it. Water was the lifeblood of everything, after all. It provided sustenance, shelter, extinguished fire, fed plants and food, made the difference between a poor harvest and a bad harvest. Maybe we relied on water a bit too much. Who knew? Maybe there was some unearthly force waiting for our dependency to reach a threshold, and then it would strike, destroying us all. Or maybe water is just water and sentient, strange sludge is just that. Something best left to fiction and fantasy.
I know a guy who likes to do urban explorations and abandoned buildings and such. I had some tours with him to historic ruins in Germany. Nothing paranormal, but interesting locations. Interesting atmosphere. A while ago, this guy showed me a handwritten text with a copy of a map. It looked old, not very old, but like from the 80s or so. It was titled Das Zwergenreich, what means the realm of the dwarfs. It described an old underground building from the Nazi time. The map showed a location in South Germany near the mountains, in a rural area with hills and forest. The guy said he was there and found the place and had the GPS coordinates of the place, so it was now easy to find. He said it's like in the middle of nowhere, just forest roads and then walking for half an hour through the woods to get there. He said he looked inside, but it wasn't very interesting. The only odd thing was stairs of concrete that were leading way down, and he didn't explore further. He said it felt strange down there, so he didn't see the things described in the text. He gave it to me and said, "In case you want to go and look for the spooky things." I wanted to, so I gave myself a tour of the place. It was not difficult to find, but when you were there, you nearly couldn't see it. The concrete block was full of moss with scrub around. The stairs were covered with high grass. They were leading down to a rusty iron door. It had an old sign, Betreten Verboten, which means entering is prohibited, and it had been locked but was broken open. I was able to open it and then walked into the dark hallway behind it. The ground was wet and slippery and it had a rotten smell. There were rooms with dirt on the floor, but nothing interesting. On the walls were rusty pipes and rotten electric cables, probably from the 1940s. At the end, stairs were leading down. I walked down 1 and 2, but even after 10 levels, there were no doors, so I walked further. After 20 stairs, it ended at a door. It was also broken open, and behind it was a big hall. There was nothing in it, just some more empty rooms, but 3 tunnels were leading straight into darkness. The written text said Tunnel 1 was broken down after some 100 meters, Tunnel 2 was too long to explore, and Tunnel 3 was leading after about half an hour walk to a strange place. Okay. It felt like it was never ending when I walked through Tunnel 3. It was huge, 2 trucks could pass each other in there. I tried to not think about how deep under the earth I was here. Then finally came another hall. And a sound. It came from the end of the hall, where a big square hole was in the ground. There were rusty vertical rails and cables, so there may have been a heavy elevator leading down. And from down there came a rhythmic sound like drums, but more metallic. somehow in between drums and gongs. Could be a machine, or the dwarfs. I looked down with my lamp, but it was so deep that I couldn't see the ground of the hole. And at that moment, when I directed the light down there, the sound stopped. Okay, I'm not easily scared, but that was the moment for me to leave. I wasn't running in the tunnel, but walking fast, so I made it in maybe 20 minutes through it. And I always had a feeling that someone was following me. But in the other hall, there was nothing special, and at the stairs also nothing. I was pretty finished after all that, and then I was really happy to see the sunlight. I don't know what it was down there, and I never went back there. It's somehow a strange mystery.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.